We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the podcast, saving money by using a property manager.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I have a guest with me this week. But before I get to my guest, I do want to talk about our continuing sponsor, Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. So if you are an attorney or title company and you're worried about malpractice, you're worried about errors and omissions, people are talking to you about E&O insurance, that's all the same thing. And that's something that Sam can help you with. He does have competitive prices, and he does help you analyze what you have now versus what he offers so that you can compare apples to apples, whether he's giving you a good deal or not. So Sam writes malpractice, E&O insurance all throughout the state of Florida, pretty much anywhere in the country. If he's not available in your state, he can get licensed in your state, or he can find someone in your state. So if you're an attorney or a title company and you have questions about your malpractice insurance, contact Sam at attorneysfirst.com or www.attorneysfirst.com, and Sam will absolutely take care of you. If he doesn't answer the ring, if you do call him and he doesn't answer on the first ring, he's told me that he will either give you a substantial cash reward or he'll give you a sincere apology, one or the other. So contact Sam if you want errors and omissions insurance. The other thing I want to still talk about, last week's episode was all about my new book, Become Debt Free in Less Than 1 Hour. That book is still available for free. You can go to SeanMYesner.com/become debt free to pick up a copy of that book. But I want to get to my guest this week. So I've known him for about 4 or 5 years now. He is a graduate of FSU, so I know I liked him instantly. He, quote, retired from IT, information technology, in 2012 to start a career in real estate. After 5 years as a commercial real estate agent, he joined Collman Properties and Central Pinellas Realty, which is a family-owned and operated licensed real estate brokerage specialized in providing residential property management services, managing rental properties on behalf of the owners of those properties. So I want to welcome my guest this week, Mark Sorokurs. Welcome, Mark.
Good morning.
I wanted to start real quick. I wanted to give out some contact information for you. So we'll get into it a couple times. I'll have it here in the notes. But if you want to give Mark a buzz, you can contact office at CollmanProperties.com. Collman is COLLMAN Properties.com. Or you can go to www.collmanproperties.com, or you can go to www.centralpinellasrealty.com. All of those are ways that you can get to Mark. But why people would want to get to you. So let's talk a little bit right off the bat. Using a property manager to save money, to save stress, to save time. So what is property management, and why is it so important for the property owner?
Well, a lot of people who buy rental properties, specifically residential rental properties, buy them as an investment. And real estate is typically a very good long-term investment. The challenge that a lot of owners have is that if they have one property, it's not that big of a deal to, have to deal with the tenant and coordinate repairs. The issue really comes with a lot of owners when they start acquiring their second, their third, their fourth property, and suddenly they find themselves devoting hours every week having to deal with leaky faucets, dripping toilets, things like that. The air conditioner suddenly going off. And that's really not what they want to be doing. Just like when people typically buy stocks and bonds, they work with a financial advisor who handles everything for them. And at the end of every month, they get their statement, they look at it, and they say, hey, I made money this month. We kind of serve the same purpose for people who own rental properties. They hire us to do everything from filling the vacancy, screening the tenant, coordinating repairs, collecting the rent, and best of all, handling the repair calls from the tenants, so they don't ever have to take an angry phone call at 11:30 at night from a tenant who's complaining about something. And that, I think, is what most owners really appreciate, is avoiding the middle of the night phone call because my toilet's dripping or my AC just turned off.
Right. And so that's where we talk about it saves a ton of the hassle. It saves a ton of I know when I bought the house that I'm in now, my wife was pregnant with our first son, and I owned a house in Dunedin. And I did consider for a little bit, did I want to rent out that house and use that house for the passive income while I was, in the new house. I ultimately decided that I sold the house because I didn't want to have to worry about, carrying two houses at the same time. I'm trying to feed a newborn and the wife and run the business and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that concerned me, one of the issues that I really had in the back of my mind was, what if the toilet gets clogged? What if the air conditioner breaks? What if, there's a infestation of ants and we need to get the exterminator out there? What if that kind of stuff happens? And I think that's where property management can be so valuable and take the headache out of, not getting the calls. And there's another thing that I really like about property management, but I'm going to bring it up here in a little bit as we get into the interview. So one of the things, the title of the episode is saving money by using a property manager. So how can property owners save money by using a property manager?
Well, there are a lot of different ways a property manager can help save you money. It could be things as simple as we manage a lot of properties. We deal with a lot of trade professionals, plumbers, electricians, licensed handymen. And because we deal with these people all the time, a lot of the time they will offer us discounts because we call them frequently. And the good news for the owner is that we pass those discounts through to the owner. We don't ever mark up a repair. We don't ever charge a repair coordination fee or whatever some other companies might call it, because we know we're spending your money to maintain your property. But that's a great way that we as a property manager can save you money. We've actually had that happen a couple of times just in the last month, where a plumber or a carpet cleaning service has given us a discount, and our automatic response is always, great, thank you so much, we appreciate that. Please make sure you put that on the invoice so the owner knows that they got a discount because of our relationship with them.
Yeah. And I think there's another aspect to it too that I've talked about as well. I could do my own taxes, but I have a CPA do it. I could mow my lawn, but I have a lawn service, and it's more this opportunity cost, time value of money stuff. So I could screen tenants. I could, do the background checks. I could interact with the tradespeople, the plumbers, the air conditioners, but, I make more money being an attorney than I do sitting on the phone talking to an air conditioner repairman. And so I think that's another place where, you step in and you do those services for the homeowner to let the homeowner do what they do for a living to make money, rather than spending time talking to those kinds of people. So I think that's another place that you all can add value to the property manager, or to the property owner rather. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, sort of along the same lines, I mentioned, talk a little bit about the due diligence process, the screening process. In other words, how do you help find tenants for your homeowners?
That's a good question. And that actually kind of ties into another way we save owners money. First, we save owners money by keeping their vacancy rate low, keeping their cash flow going. That's one thing we see, that a lot of people who are self-managing have a tendency to go vacant longer than they would if they were using a property manager. We want to get the property filled quickly, A, because it helps you, our owner, get your cash flow going, and B, if we don't have rent coming in, we're not getting paid. So we're highly motivated to make sure we get your vacancies filled quickly, and we put a good tenant in there. And in order to make sure we're putting in a good tenant, we do a very thorough background check. Our background check, we use a third-party service to do a national criminal and credit check. So we do pull national data, but we go over and above that. Once we get that report and look through the data to see what's there, we also will manually go through and check local court records, local arrest records, just to make sure we have a really good view of the applicant to see what they have in their background to make sure they're a good fit for our property.
And as we record this, we're recording basically the week before I'm going to release. I'm not going to get very political on the show, so we either do have a president-elect or don't have a president-elect at this point. But regardless, we're still dealing with the impact of COVID. So, how has COVID impacted your property management business in terms of the due diligence, in terms of finding tenants, keeping tenants, even getting rid of tenants?
Well, like every business, we've had some impact because of COVID-19. The biggest impact we've seen, obviously, is with our tenants, some of whom have had their income impacted by hours being reduced, being put on furlough, and so forth. We've had a handful of our tenants who have gone through this since the spring. We have worked with our tenants and our owners when that does happen to try to help as much as possible. Almost every single one of our tenants who has come to us with the situation we've been able to work with, and they've gotten caught up. We've had one instance where it was just not possible for the tenant to recover. So we were able to negotiate a release of the tenant to suggest to them that it's, cut their losses and maybe they need to, move in with family and try to recoup, and got them to vacate the property without having to go through a lengthy and somewhat expensive eviction process for the owner, which saved the owner money, got the tenant out who was unable to pay rent through no fault of their own, without the tenant having an eviction, which means that when they were back on their feet, they can find housing again, and giving us the ability to refill the property, to put another tenant in to get the owner's cash flow moving again.
And I think, there's that constant struggle between, we want to be considerate to the tenants who are going through some particularly hard times, but we also want to acknowledge that we've got owners that have to make mortgage payments. And so I think that's where the struggle comes in, even with some of the, the CARES Act. I know the CDC has the eviction moratorium. And so I think that's another place where property managers can be very valuable, where as a homeowner, I have an emotional investment into that house and into getting paid. As the property manager, I think much like I do as an attorney, it's not your house. So while you care about the homeowner, you can take a lot of the emotion out of it, think logically, come to a solution with the tenant, and therefore, COVID and maybe other times, maybe the tenants go through other situations where they lose out on income for one reason or another, divorce or some medical or, non-COVID related, where I think property managers can be valuable, be that go-between, be that liaison between the tenant and the homeowner. But what happens when things do go wrong, as they will do from time to time? What happens? What do you do to help the property owner when things really do go wrong and there's a legitimate fight here with the tenant?
Sure. Well, obviously, everything depends on specifically what is going on. It could be anything from, the tenant just hasn't paid the rent and it's the 4th. So we will normally, on the 3rd day, if the rent isn't here, we'll reach out to the tenant, call, just find out what's going on. After the 3rd day, we will go out and put a 3-day notice on the door to remind the tenants that the rent is late. And we will continue working the tenant until either the rent comes in or we have to go to the next step in the process, just depending on the responsiveness of the tenant and the specifics of the situation as to what's going on. Same thing with, doing an inspection. If we go into the property and we find things going on that are not good, that are tenant related, then we can, what we call, notice the tenant, meaning give a written notice to the tenant that they have violated their lease based on what the specifics are, and give them an opportunity to what's called cure the defect, meaning to fix the problem. And more times than not, once the tenant realizes that, oh, they're watching me and they're making sure that I'm not doing what I'm not supposed to, they will turn around and they will rectify the problem. In the rare instance that they don't, then obviously we step things up another notch, and we can issue them a notice going as far as terminating the lease, which we very rarely have to do, but recently just had to do that as well, as we had a tenant who moved in an unauthorized person who insisted that this unauthorized person wasn't living there. And when we got the notice from the police that there was a registered sex offender living in the property, we said, aha. So we contacted the registry, got in touch with their probation officer, issued a 7-day notice of termination, and basically got the actual tenant and the unregistered people out of the property to avoid having any problems with the owner or with the property or the neighbors in the surrounding units. So our tenants know that we pay attention. Our job is to protect the property.
Yeah, and saving them money, because if something had happened with that sex offender, we like to think you think positive, everybody is, rehabilitates and everybody deserves a second chance. But, as the attorney, if something had happened with that sex offender, that could have created liability to the homeowner. So, again, saving money that way. So a couple more quick questions, along these lines. If things go wrong and the tenant has to move out, a lot of times the question that I get and what Florida law requires is related to the security deposit. So the security deposit has to be returned within 15 days of the termination of the lease, or the property owner or property manager has to send a letter to the last known address within 30 days telling the tenant, any claims against the security deposit. But what happens if there is so much damage to the property, or the rent that's due exceeds the amount of the security deposit? What happens if the security deposit isn't enough to cover, what is needed to cover to make the property owner whole?
Well, that's a good question. We actually have a process by which we can document those, which we've already documented those costs on the claim letter that was sent to the former tenant. We can then send that out to collection. Now, just like any other person who has a debt they send to collection, you may or may not ever see the money, but we will send it out to collection. It does trigger responses from the tenants, because at some point they want to buy a car, they want to rent furniture that requires a credit check. So it does pop up, and we do periodically have people 2, 3, 4 years down the road who will reach out to us to say, hey, I have a collection with you, and we will let them know what it is. And sometimes they will actually make payments to try to resolve that debt for the owner.
Okay. And I think a lot of people get confused. Sometimes tenants will pay first month's, last month's security deposit, or some combination of those. And I know security deposit can be used to cover any unpaid rent as damages, but I know legally, and what I tell my landlord clients, rent is rent, security deposit is security deposit. We can't mix the two. We still have to send out the notices. We still have to send out the letters. So again, if you want to give Mark a call, if you want to contact Mark, three easiest ways to get a hold of him: centralpinellasrealty.com, Collmanproperties.com, and Collman is Collman, Collmanproperties.com, or office@Collmanproperties.com is his email address. Mark, do you cover it's Central Pinellas Realty, so do you do property management just within Pinellas, or do you do property management within Tampa Bay, outside Tampa Bay? What's your area of coverage, your geography?
We specialize in property management, primarily residential. We can also do commercial if it's something that's the right fit. So we take those on a case-by-case basis. We primarily focus in Pinellas County, However, we do have a few properties in Southwest Pasco, up in the Holiday Newport Richie area, and we also manage a few properties in Northwest Hillsboro, talking West Chase, Oldsmart area. So we do go outside of Pinellas if it makes sense. We've been approached by people to manage properties over on the east side of Tampa, and we've told them that it's just we're not a good fit. We can't provide you with the level of service that you deserve and expect, because being 45 minutes to an hour away each way, it's just not efficient for you as an owner to have a property manager that's far away. If there's an emergency situation, you need somebody who can get to the property quickly.
Right. And you mentioned mostly residential, majority residential, some commercial. Does the residential include only single-family homes, or does it include duplexes, triplexes, small apartment buildings, or is it just single-family residences?
Yes. No, we primarily do single-family homes. We also will do townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and even small apartment communities, again, if it's the right fit for the owner and if it's the right fit for us. So if you have a triplex, or if you've got, two duplexes and a couple of single family homes, that is not a problem for us. It's all the same process. It's just a matter of knowing the ins and outs of each particular property, which is really a benefit when you're working with a family-run business like we are. We know every property.
Right.
You're not dealing with, a company that has hundreds and hundreds of properties and a constantly changing staff who may not know the properties. We know the properties. We know our owners and we know our tenants. So if an owner calls me just, off the cuff one day and says, "Hey, what's going on with my property?" We know it, and I can answer 95% of those questions in real time on the phone with the owner, because, again, the benefit of being a smaller brokerage is that we are very intimately involved with every aspect of our business.
Okay. So I know we did a little bit of pre-planning before the episode, but I'm gonna put you on the spot and see what happens. What is your craziest property management story?
Oh, boy. Trying to decide between the people that don't have any dogs with the 3 pit bulls in the backyard or the people who don't have any issues, but yet when you go do the inspection, the smoke alarms are missing, there's half-inch layer of dust on the AC filter, and they've got exposed wires sticking out of the wall where they took apart the 220-volt outlet behind the stove.
Wow. Wow.
We've seen a lot of crazy things.
Is there you mentioned the dogs and the pit bulls, and I'm a dog person, although I don't own one right now, but is there any kind of list of dogs that you won't allow, or is that a owner by owner situation?
Pets in general, it's an owner by owner situation. We have some owners who say, "I don't want any pets." If they have a goldfish in a bowl, that's fine, but I don't want any other creatures, no cats, no dogs, no gerbils, no bunny rabbits. And we have other owners who say, anything under 35 pounds is fine. But regardless of what the owner's "yes, I'll accept pets" is, we don't allow dangerous breeds. That's an insurance issue with our insurance as well as the owners. So any animal that's considered an aggressive breed, and no judgment here, but those are typically things like German Shepherds, Pit Bulls, Rottweilers, those kinds of animals typically can't get approved just because of the inherent risk those breeds seem to generate with insurance carriers.
Okay. And I sort of figured that was the case, but I was curious. So as we sort of get to the end, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover? Anything you want to add?
Well, I would just say that it's really important for an owner, when they're going to hire a property manager, to hire the right property manager that's a good fit for them. We would love to take on every owner's property, but we may not be the best fit for every owner. That's why when an owner calls us, we spend time with them on the phone. We do a free 15-minute consult with them to find out what are their expectations, what are they looking for, because the worst thing in the world is to, get into a relationship with someone and then finding out down the road that you guys are not a good fit for each other. And it does happen periodically, but we try really hard to avoid that. So we do offer a free 15-minute consult for owners who are considering hiring a property manager. Typically, the best owners for us are people who have been with a property manager in the past and haven't been happy with them for whatever reason. Those owners typically work out the best for us as opposed to any other type of owner who may or may not have had a property manager in the past.
Okay, thank you. And I completely agree. I mean, even in my business, it's a question of fit in terms of, fit with the client and fit with the goals. And, we don't want to take on clients that have unrealistic goals. One of the other things I had thought to say where a property manager is useful, one of the things I've always said to my clients where a property manager can be useful is sometimes you may have to give bad news to the tenants. Sometimes you may have to tell them, listen, I'm sorry, we're not going to renew your lease for this reason or the other. Or the tenant will come to you with some kind of crazy request. I want to paint, the master bedroom green, something, whatever. And I'm not picking on any kind of color, and I think that's another place where a property manager can be useful because it's not me, the landlord, the owner denying your request. It's the property manager being that go-between to say, hey, listen, we talked to the owner, we tried, but for this reason, that reason, the property owner said no, so we apologize. And you can be that buffer where the owner doesn't have to constantly deliver bad news. And so I think that's another place where property managers can be really useful. So if you want to give Mark a buzz, make sure that he's a good fit for you, you're a good fit for him. Again, centralpinellasrealty.com, colemanproperties.com, or office@colemanproperties.com.
Yeah, I was going to say if they want to call, we have a real easy phone number. It's 727-733-RENT. 727-733-RENT. That's 7368. And we do monitor the phones. That's also a rollover number for our after hours emergencies. So if a tenant has, an after hours emergency, that phone is monitored throughout the day and into the evening. So if you need to reach us, you can call 727-733-RENT, and we'll be more than happy to speak with you.
Absolutely. Sounds great. I like it, RENT. I got to figure out how to get some kind of phone extension for the law office. But I think that will do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. So like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that you have more money at the end of the month rather than more month at the end of the money. Again, thank you, Mark, for being a guest on this week's episode.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And again, I'll have all your contact information in the notes, and we look forward to talking to all of you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.